you guys good at caching and stuff? Or you guys just like somewhere out there?
It
worked on the whiteboard.
Do you want to stay in there or are you going to stay on? Well, actually,
I like to move around, but I got it. Yeah, you got it.
well, the mic.
Can I have a GoPro? Just be like.
I mean, I can follow you.
All right. So I want to talk about Traffic Portal. More specifically, I want to dive into Traffic Portal a little bit deeper than I've ever really dove in with you guys. So a little bit of magic going on. So hopefully I can lift the curtain on some of the magic, and hopefully this will encourage people to jump in and start making some changes and contribute back. So Traffic Portal is a SPA. It's a single-page application. So basically, you load it up the first time, you get one index.html file, you get some CSS files, a JavaScript file. It loads one time. And as you navigate around Traffic Portal, it uses the location hash, an HTML5 location hash, to navigate between different states, render different views, and get whatever data it needs, pulls it in through the Traffic Ops API, and renders that in the browser. So let me see. Okay, real quick. So if you want to do development on Traffic Portal, first of all, you have to set up your development environment. So there's some instructions on how to do that, and it's let's see, right here. And I won't go into it too much, but you need to have some software installed, and then you need to do a few things. So you need to go into Traffic Portal. You need to clone the repository, obviously. You need to go into Traffic Portal. You need to install some dependencies. So we'll start with some application dependencies, which are found in this package.json file. So you'll go npm install. And I'll make this a little bigger. These dependencies have a lot to do with when you package up Traffic Portal. It does some stuff like it takes SAS files and turns them into CSS. It does some minification, some uglification. It's kind of the shrink wrapping of all this stuff. So like it says here, it fetches the application dependencies found in package.json and puts them in this directory right here, node modules. So that's the first thing, get your application dependencies. Second thing is we want to get the client-side dependencies. So these are things like Angular. There's some JavaScript libraries in here and such. So we can look in here. Bower. So there's this bower.json file. Here's a bunch of Angular stuff, some Bootstrap, Flot. We have a chart that's in there right now. Some jQuery. So you get this stuff by Bower install. And that reads bower.json, fetches these dependencies, and that's going to put these in underneath app, Bower components. Okay? So now you have your dependencies. Now you want to package Traffic Portal. And the guide to that is this grunt file. So in this grunt file, you're going to want to do grunt dev, or you could just do grunt because the default task is dev, and it's going to do these 3 high-level tasks. It's going to build dev, and I'll go into each one. It's going to start up a Node.js web framework called Express and a lightweight HTTP server, and then it's going to start a watcher file. So when you make changes to your source files, they'll get recompiled and you can refresh the page. Okay, so I talked about, let's see, I should slow down a little bit. Okay, so grunt dev, like I said, it does those 3 high-level tasks. Build dev does a clean, so it comes into, well, let's do it real quick. Grunt.
Grunt part of Node as well?
No, I don't think it's part of Node. But okay, so now that I ran grunt, I should have a directory called dist, and these are all our files. Here's the index.html file. Here's some CSS. Here's some images. Here's the JavaScript. Let's see.
That makes them search, I think.
What was I going to say now? Okay, so we can go into these tasks if you want real quick. We can look at them real quickly. So build dev is the first one, right? It's going to run a clean. And if you look in grunt, this grunt directory, it's going to pull this clean.js file. And it's basically, there's a global config file here. But basically, clean is what? Clearing out the dist directory and the temp directory. So we'll just clear out everything under there. Basically just does a basic clean, so no big deal there. It does a copy, so it copies some things like your images. Everything you have under source, assets, images. Copies a bunch of images into your dist directory. It does a string replace, which is used for cache busting on some of the assets that the index.html file calls. It does it builds your CSS from the Sass files. It compiles all your JavaScript. So basically through the source code, and we'll go through it, is you have all these JavaScript files, and it will take it and I'll shrink wrap it down into one JavaScript file. And it takes all your external JavaScript dependencies, and it will shrink wrap that down into one JavaScript file as well. So we can look here. Let's make that bigger. So all those shared libraries that were in bower.json got pulled in when I did bower install. When I did grunt, they all got put together into one file. They all got minified, and they're all now in this shared libs.js file. All the JavaScript I write, or anybody writes in Traffic Portal, will all get shrink wrapped and put in this app.js file. And here's some other JS files we use. So let's see. And then the second high-level task is it starts up Express Web Framework, which reads in, let's see, config.js, which reads in this config.js file and says, you know, I want to run the portal on this port, and I want to use these self-signed certs, and this is where traffic ops is going to live, and this is where, remember how we created the dist directory? This is where the static files live, and this is where I want to write an access log to. So we should be able to go to localhost 8442. Blah, blah. You can do whatever you want. Whatever you set it up in your config file to be. Trying to follow along? Yeah. Do I have to wait for you? Okay, so where does that leave me?
So all that's work is going to get wrapped up in a Docker container. So hopefully it's a much better.
Yeah, Dan's working on that a little bit, so working through some bumps on that.
We're going to Dockerize this off. So you basically spin a traffic portal with a Docker container. If you're going to work on it locally. Or just sometimes I just need a front end, right? Because if the old UI goes away and the traffic portal becomes a first-class citizen, you need to have some ability to spin it up and use it.
So not necessarily to work on traffic portal itself, but maybe some other.
Just any kind of dev or whatever, right?
It's also pretty easy to just virtually mount a directory into your Docker region.
Yeah.
So there could be a Docker region that doesn't watch on your local file system.
So there's another file here called Traffic Portals Properties. This file allows you to, I guess, have some control on how you set up Traffic Portal dynamically. So you could change the name. You want my cool front end app. You know, you can change the name of Traffic Portal. You can say, what's that? Yeah, sorry. Is that better? Right now, the dashboard auto refreshes itself. You can say, you know, I don't want that to do that. or maybe I wanted to do it and I want to change the intervals at which it refreshes. There's just a lot of settings in here. There's a lot of stuff on delivery services. So we have these 4 different categories of delivery services, basically: AnyMap, DNS, HTTP, and steering. Maybe you want to change the defaults, so when you go into the form, it has different defaults. You can change all this stuff. And it doesn't require a restart of Traffic Portal. Just you change it. When someone goes into Traffic Portal, it loads up this file and uses the properties accordingly. Let's see. Source code structure. Okay, let's go into that. I can't make this side bigger, I don't think. So, okay, so source code, we have our assets that I talked about. This is a CS file that's basically been vendored. Custom CSS is if you put any CSS in this file, you can override the default theme. Here's some fonts. Here's some images. Here's some JavaScript that's basically been vendored. That's assets directory. Common is intended for kind of reusable components throughout Traffic Portal. For example, we have different services that you might inject into different components. So I have all my services in here. For example, ASN service. You know, you can call get ASNs, get ASN, create ASN, update ASN. So you would reuse these components throughout. What's another good example? There's some utils in here that you can use.
Question. I just asked you about the static entries. Why do you have an API entry for static DNS entries but no for it?
Because I don't think it was working right. Let me see. API?
Yeah, static DNS.
Yeah, I think I went down that route creating that one. And we just don't have the proper, let me see.
I guess
So right now,
ask differently. Is it common to see API JavaScript code fill up first before you go and build a corresponding UI with it?
typically I do both hand in hand. So if I'm going to build a static DNS entries UI, then I would create this static DNS entry service. But if you look in here, there's only one. We only have one backend right now, API endpoint. So I couldn't build the whole UI.
Okay.
You know, so that's why this one's kind of incomplete.
I see.
Yeah. So what else? I said there was said utils, right? So there's utils, and then under modules, there's things like, you know, I put these in here because I was kind of thinking at some point maybe I'd reuse these components, but you got all these tables in here. Like the traffic portal is just a bunch of tables and a bunch of forms, basically. There's an ASN table, there's a cache group table, delivery service table. Even though they're not being reused really right now, they could be. So these are components that kind of stand alone. Tables, forms, dialogues, for example, like throughout Traffic Portal, you see these dialogues that pop up. Are you sure you want to do this? Do you want to delete this? If you want to delete it, enter its name and it will delete it. So these are just reusable components, right? And then really the kind of the, maybe not the heart, but the Traffic Portal is broken down into, I guess kind of the navigation of Traffic Portal is broken down into two main areas, private and public. And we'll go into that, what those mean. But basically that means anything under public does not require authentication. So you'll notice the only thing in there, the only view in there is the login, right? You don't need to be authenticated to get to the login page. Everything else falls under private. You need to be logged in to get to the ASN table, to get to the cache group table, the delivery service table, anything. And we'll talk about how the states of Traffic Portal play into the structure of this. So let me see if I'm to that yet. Style scripts is just, I just set a high-level variable for that I use throughout. The Traffic Portal is currently using API 1.3, so I just set a global variable basically. And styles is a bunch of here's the theme. It's a SCSS file or SAS file that gets compiled into CSS. Here's all a bunch of, not too much, but a little bit of extra CSS that's used. Okay, so let's get into the funner stuff. Okay, so these are the main design aspects of Traffic Portal that if you understand these design aspects, you'll start to understand how the whole thing's put together. So really, Traffic Portal is built with the concept of nested states and nested views. So nested states, if you think about a website, it says /ASN/1/ everything's nested. So the states follow this nested technique as well. So let's talk about each one. So at the root of Traffic Portal is the Traffic Portal state. That's the root state. And it's defined in app.js. Let's go look at that. Let me just navigate to it over here, actually. App.js is right here. It's in the root of the source directory. And so you'll see here's the Traffic Portal state. It has a URL of just /. It's the root state, right? It's using this master template. So states help you define templates. They help you define. So when you go to this state, use this view template. When you go to this state, maybe there's some dependencies that need to be resolved. If you go to the ASN state, you're going to use the ASN view, and you're going to have to go get the ASNs. So that's a dependency. And there's some other things. So let's see. So basically, these states build upon each other. So the first one was Traffic Portal, and it said, let's just use this. It said, use this template, right? And then the next one is Traffic Portal Public, and it says, my URL is / empty string. So it didn't add anything to the URL. And then trafficportal.public.login said, my URL is map is a / empty string + empty string. So it didn't add anything to the URL either. So when you navigate to where's my to the root. Did I start this gap? When you navigate to this, to /, right? The Angular is trying to figure out which state am I on right now. And I'm on these two states. So I'm on the /, right? These two states are abstract states. So it's the one that's non-abstract. So I'm on the public Traffic Portal public login state. Bear with me on this. I know it's kind of confusing, but so I'm on the trafficportal.public.login state, which inherits from the trafficportal.public state, which inherits from the Traffic Portal state. So I have to build up my views, and I have to do all my dependencies according to those three states. So let me see if I have this next. So first thing it wants to do is based on the URL, it knows what state it's on, right? And so first thing it wants to do is it wants to figure out what view to put together. And views are also nested. So we said the first state was Traffic Portal, right? If you look at this, it says use this view, right? Master template.html. So let's open that up. Master template. Master template.html has some HTML, and then it has these placeholders in there where basically it says I'm going to build the outside structure of the HTML, and in these placeholders where you have these UI views, header, message, content, it's basically building the outside template, and then so it says, okay, I'm done. I'm the Traffic Portal state, and I've done what I'm supposed to do. I've built the outside template. Now let's go down to the next one, which is trafficportal.public. So if you go into modules, public, so these index.js files are where these states are defined. So in here, here's the traffic portal.public state. And here it says, inside the navigation view, inject this template. Inside the header view, inject this template. So its job is it took those placeholders and it injected templates in there. Navigation.template, header, message, and public template. And then we're going to go down to the next state, which is trafficportal.public.login, which if you go into login, his job is to take, this public guy had a UI view in here, and the nested views get a little bit messy, but it creates it pretty powerful. You can start to wrap. Everything is going to be wrapped, basically, in these outside templates, right? So we said trafficportal.public.login. He's going to inject login.template based on this guy. So in here, put the login template. And so we're done. So now we've got our view. Our view's been built up. Okay. So that's views. So does that make sense? You have states, which are hierarchical or nested.
And,
You have views, which are hierarchical or nested.
and you build that manually. There's no like
Yeah,
generate page and then it creates all that stuff. You build
Yeah.
it manually.
manually. Yeah. So there's a little bit of boilerplate you have to go through, but
So is the nested views more about layout? Or is it, you said state, so that means that
nested views are about layout. Yes.
Okay.
The state dictated the views to build, and they built them in a nested fashion. But state is also going to do some other things too that we'll get into. So let's see. I guess we'll go this way. So it built our layout, right? It put this login.template.html right there, and we've got our view. So basically, this is what got rendered, right? I think that's the navigation on the left, the header on the top. There's a message in there, but it's hidden right now because there's no message. That middle section is the content section, and it put login.template in there. But also, there's a thing called view controller. So when the state is called, template is created, and we're going to have a controller that goes along with the template. So if we look in right here, we have this login controller. So the view is being rendered, and now this controller is going to be initialized. And let's go to login controller. Login controller. You define your methods here. You put data basically here. And then the way it works is that, go back to my thing. When you create a view and a controller and you attach a controller to that view, they share a namespace called scope. So we can put data in the controller and we can bind to it in the view. And we can do two-way data binding. So we can have inputs in the view that are populated from data in the controller, and then when you change the value in the view, it updates the value in the controller. So it uses data binding, which is really powerful.
When you say it updates, it happens on the fly?
Yeah. Yep. Two-way data
Not
binding.
necessarily a certain blur events or anything like that?
No. Yep. On the fly. Yep.
Okay.
Yep. What else? So here's data binding. Synchronization between the model and the view. I feel like. Okay, so dependency injection we can use as well too. So we have a login controller, right? So in the login controller, I have this login method, and it's going to use auth service. So remember how I had all those APIs defined? I can just inject this in with dependency injection. So in this case, I need auth service, I need user service. I can delegate I can create this method, but I can delegate the work really to that reusable service. What else? So there's a lot of things. Dependency injection, I typically inject services is the big one. Sometimes utils, sometimes user models. There's a case where when you log in for the first time, I get your user, and rather than, I need to know that user throughout the system, right? For example, there's a lot of places your users use, so I'll actually put it in a user model, and I'll save it and pass it around through the system and so forth. Okay, then the next thing is resolves. So resolves are also attached to states, and resolves are dependencies basically. So for example, I was saying if you go to the ASN state, one of its dependencies is to get ASNs. So let's just kind of walk through each one of these. So if we go back, we'll use our login as the example again, right? So we're at the root, we're at slash. So we're at the trafficportal.public.login state. So it's going to go through and look at all the resolves or the dependencies it needs for each state in that nested fashion. So if we go to app.js, it says here, before you render this state, please go get this. And it gets, remember our trafficportal.properties file? It says, please go get this, basically. And so it will, again, it delegates this traffic portal service. I can open that up. What did it say? It's calling this method, right? It's just doing a get, pulling in that file, and then it'll take that file and it'll store it in a model called properties model. But it's saying, okay, so for the traffic portal state, go get this. Okay, now let's go to the next one, which was trafficportal.public. There's no resolves here. And then let's go to the next one, trafficportal.public.login. There's no resolves here. Okay, so it says, all right, I got the properties model. I've rendered the view, and I've got everything you told me to get in this state. So I'm done with those two things. And a resolve, the view won't render until it gets all the things it needs. In this case, it got the properties model, so it will render its view. Now, what's the difference between public and private? So the reason I separated these things into public and private is because now, if you go to, for example, trafficportal.private/ASNs. So traffic portal, we said the dependency was to get the traffic portal properties file. Public did nothing, didn't care. Just they had no dependencies. But private does something. Private will, if you look in private's index file, it's going to do a couple things. Well, so you can log in through the portal using a token. If you put $token equals and you have a token that's on your user in the database, you can get in. That's how you reset your password, basically. So it'll do two things. First, it will look to see if you have token on the URL, and if you do, it will attempt to log you in that way. But if you don't, I'll make this bigger. If you don't, which is 99% of the time, right? What it will do is it will try to fetch your current user. It will look to see in the user model if user's been loaded. And if user has been loaded, it will use that. If it hasn't been loaded, it will go back to the server and try to get, it will call an API to get current user. If you're not logged in, or your cookie's bad, that will return a 401, which will throw you to the login screen. So that's the only difference between public and private. You go to anything under private, it's going to go down that state. It's going to walk down the states, getting all the resolves, and the second one it's going to hit is private, and that's going to require the user. And if it doesn't have the user, it'll throw a 401. So that's where these states are pretty powerful. Okay, so I can look here. So resolves. Here's another example too. So traffic portal, we'll go to traffic portal private cache checks. Actually, I'll just pull it up. Cache checks. So what I did is I was already logged in. I already had a cookie in there, right? So it already had the user in the user model, so it skipped that and pulled this up, right? So if we go to cache checks, if I wanted to go to this page, you know, this is the URL. We know that traffic portal is / traffic portal private adds nothing, and this state adds the cache checks part to it, right? So it's going to render this template. I'll make that bigger. It's going to render this template, it's going to initialize this controller, and it's going to run a resolve, and it's going to say, okay, before I render this view, I need to go get this. And here's another injected service. It's going to make a call. And the interesting thing that it's going to do here is it's going to take this, once it gets the cache checks, it's going to inject it into the controller. So here it is right here. And then these cache checks, if you were listening from earlier, I take them and stick them in the scope variable. And the scope is shared with the view, and now the view I can bind to the view. So if you look in here, this is cache checks is an array, I guess. So I do this repeat over cache checks. And I mean, this is pretty nice because you can just do minimal amount of HTML code, and it will just loop through the array and create these TRs. And in HTTP, it will put this, and so data binding is pretty powerful, and it allows you. This is probably one of the messier views, to be honest, because there's a little bit of logic in here, but it allows you to keep everything pretty clean. All right. Let's see if I can build a new one in front of you guys. So let's say we want to create a foos. So I put in foos, right? And it didn't find it, so it just kicked you back to login. It's like it tries to take that URL and figure out a state, and there's no state for that, so we'll have to build that, right? So we'll go, you want to make it private or public? Let's make it private. Create a new directory. Foos. We'll start off by defining the state. So new file, index.js. I'm gonna cheat a little bit because I forget the syntax. So we'll just call it the module. This is an Angular module. I won't get too concerned about what that is, but what's the state we talked about? We'll call it foos. We'll give its URL foos. Foos. Make this a foos controller. Let's not worry about a resolve yet. We'll add that later. We're going to do this too. Okay, so we've defined the state. We actually have to register it now, so app.js. These are all these modules that are defined. Oops, what did that do? Foos. How's this guy do? Okay, so remember I said before we had a watcher file? So every time I make a change, uh-oh, didn't like that. Foos controller. Oh, I didn't create a foos controller yet. Let's not do a controller yet. See if that builds. Okay, so it says when you go to the foos URL, that's the foos state, and it's going to pull in this template, so we got to create that template. New file. building. Refresh. Okay, that worked. Yay. All right, let's make it a little fancier than that. So let's create a controller now. Let's see. Who's controller? Again, I'm going to cheat. Is that big enough? We'll put something in there. Let's do scope as our secret variable where we can share stuff. We'll go foods as, I don't know, an array. Name. Oops. Foo1. Two. Three. Okay, so we got some data in our controller. So let's go to our view. Maybe make that H1. Oh, sorry. Use this Angular tab. ng repeat foo in foos. Foo.name. Got bigger. Let it build. There we go. So you put the data in the controller, you bound it to the view, did some fancy Angular stuff and looped over it. But let's see. Let's pull this out of here. Let's make it a resolve instead of hard coding that in there. So let's steal this. Should have copied that. Foos. Oops. Sorry. I should just copy that. Go away. So what this says is, render the template, but run this resolve first, which it's hard-coded right here, so it's not going to take very long, right? And then I'm going to inject those foods into here. And the reason you have to put this in here twice is because when it gets minified, a lot of time I think these variable names get squashed down to like an F or an S or something, and they don't work anymore. So if we go scope.foos equals foos. Okay, so now we're resolving a dependency, we're injecting it in the controller, we're sticking it in the scope variable, and we're binding it to the view. Built. Well, that blows. You knew that would happen, right? Foos, return foos. Did it? Oh, I don't have my controller. Where'd my controller go? That's a problem. I blew away my controller. Yay. Okay, so one last thing. We'll do this. We'll use a rail service, but I don't want to create a foo service, so I'll use the ASN service and return ASN service dot get ASNs. So this will go out and call that API endpoint. But that's not going to work in our... What's that? Yeah, traffic ops is running. But so I'm going to take the ASNs. I'm going to actually put it in a collection called foos, but I know it's ASNs really. So this is really ASN.ASN. Let's see this. So get the foos, which are really ASNs, put it in the foos, inject it into the controller, but they're really ASNs, bind it to the scope, bind it to the template, show one of the properties. There it is. So that's it in a nutshell, and pretty much 95% of the traffic portal works this way. So if you ever find yourself, you know where you are, right, from the traffic portal. You know you're on cache groups, right? Find the state that's associated with that URL. It will be trafficportal.private/cache groups. And that view is built up from every piece of that state. The view's built up that way. The dependencies are built up that way. Anything else? I think that's pretty much it.
That's a suggestion.
Yeah.
Can you put everything you just did in a readme?
Yeah, so this presentation was like the first part of that. Now that I have all my thoughts organized, I can put it in a nice README or something.
You don't need a reading now.
Dylan and I can do a quick traffic ops Golang and do a database migration, and then the next time somebody needs a new piece of data, they can just follow the steps instead of shoving it in the parameters.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, so, but I'll definitely put how to, how to spin up a new view, how to, and I think Eric was talking about they might have different parts you'd want to add to this. So they're pretty granular,
How much of this is like standard Angular JS, and how much of it is something that you need to
that
as we do it?
the Angular is like the data binding part, the dependency injection part, a lot of those tags, like that ng repeat stuff. The rest of it is not so much Angular per se. I almost feel like Angular is like gives you the pieces, and you have to come up with the framework.
So you definitely need to document what
Yeah.
best practices.
But it uses some uses UI router, which really defines those states and views. So I didn't dream this all up. It's kind of cobbled together from a couple things,
Yeah, I work on front-end apps that are built in a very similar way.
Yeah. So the nested views sometimes takes you a little while to wrap your head around, but it's probably like the CRUD framework. The first time you go, whoa, but then you do it a few times and you're like, oh, yeah, it's not so bad. And it's all consistent, and it's all...
What is Cisco planning on doing when all the APIs are done and everything's driven by the API? Are you guys going to be using the Angular JS app that comes with the open source project, or are you going to rewrite everything into your own thing?
Yeah, so right now we have our own GUI, also based on Angular, but a total rewrite, which has about 80% of the stuff in Traffic Ops and Traffic Portal in there. No profiles and parameters, mainly. But it's a lot of work to keep up.
Mhm.
It's really expensive.
Yeah.
So I think we're looking at ways to streamline that and stay closer to what the open source Traffic Portal has, but maybe put like some branding or look and feel on it.
Yeah, so there's that custom
extensions and
Yeah,
other
so
features.
do some styles.
There's a custom CSS file in there that you can
Yeah.
write all the CSS you want. It will just override. This is basic Bootstrap
Right.
theme stuff.
Yeah, mainly
Yeah.
right now we have a lot of automation to handle the queue updates, snapshot issues, so our customers don't have to worry about it. Maybe that goes away with self-service and we don't need that code that we're kind of keeping to ourselves right now. And we could just use whatever gets built.
Would be kind of cool if we were on the same thing.
Or maybe we put buttons that call our private APIs in Traffic Portal. I don't really know where it goes.
One of the other things that we talked about, which would be nice, is if there was a way for, so we have, in our GUI, we have things for monitoring, we have things for analytics and other stuff. And one of the reasons for going down that path and developing that application was that some of that stuff was not necessarily integrated into a single UI in Traffic Portal in the beginning. And now that this has been rewritten, and it seems like it's pretty modular and extensible, it would be nice if we could combine a lot of that stuff into the GUI framework here.
Yeah, I think
provide ways to show all of that information.
you can modify the menu and add other things in there as well, right?
Yeah.
Very easy, like not things not part of the app can be added to the menu pretty easily as well. So, and I would think it'd be really helpful if you guys were on the same code as we were.
Yeah.
Because
Yes.
more people working on it, more people finding problems, more people, all that stuff, right? And it
Yeah,
would be useful for you as well, because you don't have to maintain it all yourself.
Yes, that's
But
exactly
I
right.
think you gotta figure out what the hierarchy is.
Yeah.
Because I think this is lower down the hierarchy,
Yeah.
because we have other products that need to use
I agree.
our analytics and our monitoring
Yeah.
that aren't gonna pull in Traffic Portal.
Yeah.
So maybe we don't wanna put our screens for that
Well,
stuff
they
in
don't
here.
necessarily have to be a part of this specific layout or whatever, but at the same time, if the overall portal is designed in such a way that, hooks for those things exist and can be used in an easy way, then, it becomes more straightforward.
so this menu, I mean, this is kind of, you can extend the portal right now. I mean, you can create your own menu items, basically, maybe you want to link to Google or something, But that's kind of, it's not super extendable, but it's something if you want to put some menu items in there, quick and dirty. I should probably come up with a better way. I mean, it's all modular. It all uses Angular modules. So a way to, like, if you build your own modules, it just pulls them in or something.
Yeah, we have a feature that we need to open source called device groups, which is basically allowing you to group a bunch of servers together.
Mhm.
You assign that whole group to a delivery service.
Right.
Instead of needing to do it by cache group or profile or whatever. So yeah, when we build that, obviously we'll add a new item to the navigation for device groups and build new screens for it.
Cool. All right, well, now you guys know how it works, so no more excuses.
No more whining, no more excuses.
Yeah. I wanted to show, let's see. I wanted to show one more thing because this might be the last time I'm at the top of this list. Dwayne's hot on my heels, man, with the API rewrite. So, and plus now I'm handing over the portal to all of you. So. My commit should come
down to number 5 sooner or later, just like me.
Yeah.
I was number 1 for a while.
I was number one for a while.
When you guys have an open source project.
Sure, 73,000 is really
All right.